Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Ethical Consumer Podcast. I'm your host, Julia, and today I am with Ben Weir of Simply Good Jars, based in Philadelphia. Welcome, Ben.
Hi, Julia. How you doing?
I am pretty all right. Thanks for hopping on a call today. I'm excited to talk about Simply Good Jars. You guys have been on my radar for a little while, being in the food and beverage industry, well, the food industry in this case, but also having sustainable packaging at the forefront of your business model. You're solving the problem of getting food while on the go that is nutritious and also helpful for the environment. So I'm excited to talk about it with you.
Awesome.
It'll be good. So first of all, I would like to ask you the question I ask most of our guests. What is your favorite food? And it can be one of the jars or it can be jar adjacent.
Well, I guess other than Simply Good Jars, my favorite food has to be just, mom's pasta and meatballs. I'm a closet Italian. The name, the complexion doesn't allude to that fact, but I love going home and just getting, mom's red sauce, homemade turkey meatballs, nothing better.
Nice. I love it. Some nostalgia right there.
Absolutely.
Too good. That's been the second time someone has brought up their Italian heritage and like the way mom would make it. A previous guest, Empower Coffee Roasters, talking to Denise about that. Napolitano is her last name. So hers is not hidden. Hers is like out there in the open. She is very much Italian. Hers was, what was it? I think it was a bolognese, but I think it was a vegan bolognese if I remember correctly. So yes, second favorite Italian dish. So tell me a little bit about Simply Good Jars. I teased a little bit in the intro there of sustainable packaging, nutritious food on the go. Why was Simply Good Jars founded? What's it based on?
Yeah, so Simply Good Jars was founded back in 2017, really with the goal of increasing access of fresh, healthy food. Our CEO, Jared Cannon, is a culinary trained chef of about 18 years. And, while he was going back to school, getting his MBA, thinking about founding the company, really found it just very difficult to eat healthy with this sort of on-the-go lifestyle. And now this is someone who has all of the culinary training, who, with time can really make amazing food. But, even himself ran into that predicament that I think a lot of consumers find themselves in. So, started by, thinking about ways to get fresh food to individuals, kind of settled on this sort of jar model, which is not really a new concept. I think people have seen food in jars, especially salads, for a long time. But then was able to really, take that and grow the business to the point now where we've been able to, really make innovations on packaging, sustainability, packaging shelf life, starting with, a ready-to-eat salad, which is an amazing product. We have a whole lineup of chef-crafted salads, but, even expanding into new categories of products. So it's always been our mantra to really increase access to food. But also, as a B Corporation, we think about, our role in the overall food landscape. And, as part of that, we really believe that, not everyone, can afford a $9, $10 salad. So how do we find options and ways of feeding those people? And also, how do we just think about the life cycle of our product, putting a product, a fresh item that has no packaging naturally into a plastic package may seem a little crazy, but in doing so, these packages were designed specifically to live on beyond their initial use. So we've got a lot of things that we do around those areas to really bolster the overall mission and ethos of the company.
I love it. And you are based in Philadelphia, but you are present in several other states. We have Pennsylvania, New York, Illinois, Ohio, West Virginia, Maryland, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. I didn't memorize those. Those are on my cheat sheet. How are you planning on expanding further? Because you're not yet in Iowa, so I can't get Simply Good Jars yet, which makes me sad. But you're in Illinois. You're getting closer.
That's right, and hopefully Iowa soon. Our distribution model is really built on the backs of our customers, and those are major food retailers as well as food service providers. So our business model has shifted numerous times over the years, and right now we're in really a wholesale model in which the product is resold. So whether you're going to your local grocery store, convenience store, the corporate cafeteria when you return back to an office or a college campus. Those are all places where we think Simply Good Jars can fit in. Hopefully fulfilling the void where, some of the, open air salad bars and things like that have now since gone away due to the pandemic.
Definitely. And when you think about the options that are in like you mentioned, gas stations or cafeterias, college campuses, things like that, like grab and go places, when you think of the packaging that the salads are in most of the time, it ends up being a non-reusable package that has like a plastic film that you peel off. My brain is going to a Lunchable because that is the quintessential example of that peel off top. You have a Lunchable type package that flowers do not look good in it. You cannot drink out of it. You cannot reuse it. Like, it's going in the garbage or ideally in the recycling, but only like 90% of recycling actually gets recycled as far as plastic goes. So that's unfortunate. But it solves the problem of the single waste. Like, we think of single-use plastic bottles. Of course, you can use that plastic bottle again and again. After a little while, it does end up deteriorating. But the idea is it has more than just one use. It keeps going. It keeps going. So it's a wonderful thing to be able to get those on the go. Like you mentioned, salad bars. It's going to be a minute before I think I can eat at a buffet again, Ben. I think I've become more of a germaphobe. So having that option just sounds great, and making sure that it's healthy food, nutritious food. And you mentioned the price point, which can hold some people back sometimes. So I love that it seems like everything has been considered, including sustainability, which is something that you'd worked with in the past. Now, is sustainability your job? Is that something that you cover at Simply Good Jars, or do you kind of cover another sector at this point with them?
I like to think that sustainability at Simply Good Jars for me is my passion project. My direct title is head of strategic partnerships, and while most of that is a traditional sales role, I do believe that there are partnerships that we've been able to forge, whether it's with Feeding America, in terms of donating meals for every jar that is pledged not to go in a landfill. Working with even my old employer TerraCycle in the past to recycle our hard to recycle packaging waste, secondary packaging and things like that. So, for me, it's sort of just, I know, it's built into the DNA of the company, and it's now really kind of built into my DNA. So it's something I'm passionate about, and certainly always hope I can contribute with that. And, benefits of being a startup is you get to wear lots of hats.
There you go. Most definitely. You get to kind of take turns and hopefully partner. You had mentioned on our previous call, since it's been a pandemic over the past year or so, you are not relatively new to Simply Good Jars, but one of the newer employees. So you actually got to meet your coworkers in person for the first time a couple weeks ago. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So I joined in the middle of the pandemic back in August. Swapping computers in the virtual office space, but the benefit of being in the food production space here is that our team, thankfully, is all vaccinated. So we were able to gather in person, albeit still, in a outdoor kind of capacity. But
yes,
it was wonderful. I think that we all miss that human connection. And as resilient as people have been, it's still something that we crave as human beings. So definitely a nice piece to hopefully propel us into brighter days.
Definitely. Most definitely. I am proud to say I have my second vaccine as well. I am officially 2 weeks out. So yes, still being very careful with what I choose to partake in, but thankful that I have the possibility of human contact again. That's been nice.
Congratulations.
So thank you. You mentioned that you worked at TerraCycle previously, and TerraCycle has been mentioned several times in regular length episodes as well as some minisodes. I actually did a minisode devoted to TerraCycle when I found them on a bag of late July chips. I was excited that I can actually do something good with a bag of tortilla chips. I have a few cosmetic products that also I'm thankful that were not previously recyclable, but now I can send them in or drop them off at those store locations. How did you start with TerraCycle? You mentioned sustainability is just kind of in your DNA now. Was this something that you found in college or something that's always been meaningful for you?
Yeah, it's definitely one of those sort of later in life developments. I actually started my career in big food or big consumer packaged goods, working for companies like Nestle and Campbell's. But while going to get my MBA, I noticed that there was a sustainable business track, and that, for whatever reason, appealed to me. I don't know if it was because I had done, park cleanups in my, neighborhood, or had done some mission trips while I was in my undergrad. But for some reason, I just kind of had an interest, and thought that this might be not only a smart, way to differentiate myself, but really a very, sustainable career choice. And so I did that program at Villanova University, and then, really was looking for a way to apply it. And a company like TerraCycle is the perfect marriage, where we take large CPG companies, we look at how they can be more sustainable with their packaging, and TerraCycle fills that void where other companies or municipalities can't. So that really gave me the ability to cut my teeth, if you will, in the sustainability industry. To get involved in a startup. They were launching the Loop platform, which is a circular packaging platform that's still live in, I believe, 8 countries today. So, just an amazing overall experience, and transitioned very nicely into what I do today at Simply Good Jars.
Excellent. I love it. It's really kind of it's a cool story that you started in big food, and then you found this idea of the sustainability you tracked. You said when you were words are hard today, when you were doing your MBA, and now you're back into food, you're in smaller food, you're in a startup that is incorporating sustainability. So everything has just kind of prepared you for what you're doing. You added the sustainability on top. You already had experience in the food and beverage industry.
It's funny how life works, right? I can't claim that it was all done intentionally. Sometimes, you just kind of, go with your gut, if you will. But that's, it's been great to just really, involve myself in such a fun industry where there's just constant room for innovation. And at the end of the day, it's a fun topic. I think people like to talk about food and beverage. This is, the purpose of your podcast. And I think, it's just, it's a good space to be in. So.
Definitely. And we all love food. I hope. I certainly do. So what types of food? You mentioned that currently you are doing salads in jars, which, yes, is not a fairly new idea. I remember on Pinterest years ago, they were showing you how to pack your salad in a jar. You do the chickpeas on the bottom because they're not going to get gross. And then the lettuce goes all the way on top and the dressing drains down. But you've started with salads. Do you feel like there's going to be newer developments coming shortly? Are you branching out with your main dish types?
Yes. Yeah. So the short answer is yes. We are actively looking at different categories. I'd say, the constraints in which we operate in, would be the fresh food space. So you won't see us getting into shelf stable products anytime soon, even though we've been asked by consumers before. But really, I think looking at how do we build out the portfolio of salads, because one of the things that's going to get lost with the salad bar is the personalization or customization of entrees. So we have 5 currently in rotation that give us a couple of vegetarian options, a couple of gluten-free options, and a couple with protein, both animal and fish. But at the end of the day, there's so many different permutations we can make. We'll have to expand that number, but maybe not infinitely so, to capture at least a larger portion of consumer preference. But beyond salads, it's beverages, it's breakfast, it's snacking items. We think we can do a lot all around this idea of preservation and extended shelf life. Salads, for example, are not something you typically associate with a long shelf life. When you open your bag of salads, especially if you get the pre-cut, pre-washed variety, it's only good for a few days. So we're proud to say our salads are good for 10 days. That's been a innovation that we actually have a patent pending process around, and we think we can achieve similar gains in other industries. As we kind of create and formulate different ways to preserve without the use of preservatives, which is a double-edged sword.
So you mentioned the idea with preserving without preservatives, and you do this with how your jars are sealed. Did I read that correctly on your website?
Yep, how the jars are designed and sealed. The types of materials we're using, all sorts of that, and even as you explained, there's certain best practices around how you layer ingredients and all that. So it's probably 30 or 40 different factors, but that's what we've been able to commercialize now at scale. So no matter where we go in the country, we'll have those same sort of, practices around that, as well as, benefits of SQF3 facilities and the highest level of food safety and quality, because especially in the produce space, things like recalls are very common, and we're very happy that we've never had that issue, but we always of course prevent against that kind of end result.
Sure, definitely. And with the jars, so you mentioned earlier that it's called Feeding America. Is that correct? Who you're partnered with?
Yep. So that would be the national sort of entity. They operate many local chapters of food banks in the U.S. Philabundance would be our local Philadelphia chapter that we've worked with for a number of years, and as we expand to new markets, we always seek out the local affiliate.
Oh, that's wonderful. So so you're going through Feeding America because it's a national corporation, and at the same time you're telling me they have different branches. So there's one in Philadelphia that you go through, so that is it anything that's scanned or purchased in Philadelphia then goes back into that community via the food bank?
Yeah, that's it.
In that area. That's such a cool thing. So here I assumed that it was just going into the national organization, not knowing as much about Feeding America as perhaps I should. Didn't realize that would then trickle down, and it really stays kind of local.
Yeah, it's a super easy way to make an impact. It's really, what our mission is built on, about empowering everyday people. So simple as, eat your salad. When you're done with your jar, simply scan a QR code on the jar and pledge not to put that jar in the trash can. So whether that's, putting a nice plant in there, reusing it for dry goods or household items, or even recycling. It's a, recyclable, curbside. So, for any of those reasons that you pledge not to put that in the landfill, we'll donate one meal equivalent to someone in need in that local community. So it's just one of the things that we, want to do to incentivize our consumers not to create waste unnecessarily. I mean, like I said, the jar plays a very important role in getting the product to you in a safe, healthy, and less wasteful way from a food waste perspective. But also, we have to think about the full impact of all the activities we do. And, we'll always look to continue to optimize that process over time. We recently just learned that the black lids in some municipalities are harder to recycle than others, just based on the way that the material recovery facilities are set up. So we actually have a process now to transition to a white lid. So you're always learning and evolving. I don't think that we ever claim to have all the answers, and that's just the nature of being in such a dynamic space.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people are really starting to realize the importance of reuse in the reduce, reuse, recycle. Just because, as you mentioned, not every municipality has the capability to recycle every type of plastic or every type of material. I mentioned this in actually like maybe our third episode. This, I think, is going to be episode 35. So that's been a minute. In the previous health food store that I worked at, I did not realize that just our two towns nestled next to one another. I live in Cedar Falls. The health food store is in Waterloo. It's like Minneapolis, St. Paul. You don't know where one starts and when one ends. Waterloo, I believe at the time, did not take brown glass. They didn't take colored glass. Cedar Falls took colored glass. So even just across, like, it just depends on which recycling bin that you go to, where you're located, what the rules are. And it's so challenging. I think a lot of people really are looking to sustainable packaging when they're purchasing things. At least I am. I know several of my friends are too, just because recycling is still imperfect. I wish it wasn't, but it's nice that you've seen that, or you personally, Ben, it's nice that you've seen that. The Simply Good Jars has found that, and you're tweaking your packaging to make it at least easier to recycle in places that won't take the black lid. Why will it not take black plastic? Is there something with the tint?
Something about the use of infrared lasers in terms of how they sort the package. Now we're getting really into the deep end of MRFs, but at the end of the day, it's things that we're being educated on by people who are experts in those fields, and then it's on us to make the change, because not only do we care, but our consumers care, and that's obviously a very important motivation for us. So we want to make sure we're being good stewards by all the things that we set up and sort of pledged as a B Corp. I know I saw you did a piece on B Corps as well. So that's a proud partnership that we really stand behind. And it's not all encompassing, but it's really just a stamp of our beliefs that we put proudly on every package and every publication that we put out.
Definitely. I was B Corp was a certification that I was kind of torn on initially in the beginning because it can be really expensive for smaller companies to do that. And in that episode, and I think a few prior episodes, folks that did not choose to pursue a B Corp just because they were really in their startup phase and did not have the funding to be able to do that, just the importance of trust with the company that you're purchasing from too. The fact that you have considered so many different possibilities from the lid to scanning the QR code. I have to think there has to be some piece of psychology with that. So if you have not seen their packaging, so there's a QR code on the jar. Once you're done, you scan the QR code. That then says Simply Good Jars will donate a meal. Is it a meal or a percentage of purchase, or what gets put into Feed America?
Yeah, a meal equivalent donation. So
Meal equivalent. Okay. Got you. So you scan this QR code promising you're not going to throw it in the trash. There has to be some psychology around that this person has promised via scanning this QR code that they're going to do the right thing. You would hope and think that that would just trickle into other aspects of their life, other perhaps reusable goods or recyclable goods that even though they didn't scan that QR code, they're still thinking about it because they did that at least once, maybe twice, maybe a couple times if they're a returning customer. Do you know if there's something behind that?
we hope so. We hope so. I think the kind of science there, or maybe it's not even science, but the learnings there. Are just I think about my elderly Italian grandmothers who were sort of born into this immigrant lifestyle, and they've always reused and repurposed things. I see friends of theirs who make wine and put it into old water bottles, or sauce containers that are being repurposed into other things. And so I think there is that mindset there where especially if you go a few generations back, nothing went to waste. Everything had a second, third, hopefully fourth, fifth life. And that's really, I think, at the end of the day, it's, plastic isn't necessarily inherently evil. Glass isn't evil. Metals aren't evil, but it's how they're used. So, if we can give more value to those materials, then I think, we find ourselves in a less wasteful mindset, and also in something that, becomes, contagious, if you will.
Definitely. Some of my favorite jars to drink out of they're jars of jam that we've gotten at the store. And they're just in pretty little mason jars. Some of them even have handles. And they were free with the cost of the jam. I think I might have said that recently on another podcast, but it's my favorite jar to drink out of. It makes me so happy. And on the Italy thing, so I don't know if I've discussed this before on the Ethical Consumer. My fiance's last name is Andrini, also not hiding much of the Italianness there. And we were there a few years ago visiting friends. And, this was Hungary. We have been to Italy to visit friends, but when we were in like the wine country of Hungary, people would just come to these little cut out wine cellars in the hillside, and they would bring plastic water bottles, or they would bring, jugs that to me looked like a jug that you would transport gasoline in. And maybe it was like the thick industrial opaque plastic, but it is even still, those communities that are more used to, what do I want to call it? Maybe not an artisan lifestyle, but just using everything that they can, reusing it and keeping it in, not necessarily the loop cycle like TerraCycle, but just keeping it in rotation. They're just using what they have and going to get it. They're also not creating more packaging. Like they're not bottling this wine at these little countryside wine cellars. The only way that you can take it home is if you bring your own jar, which is something that people are doing now, I feel like, in the States, that I don't think I saw when I was growing up. I don't think bring your own container was really a thing here.
No, I don't think so. And hopefully, these trends continue, right? I think there's been intense or increased scrutiny with COVID. It just raises a lot of concerns around, reducing, the single-use waste, because, we're obviously all benefiting from masks and visors and things like that. But there are industries, everything from gas cans to beer growlers to areas where reuse can exist, and if it's not reuse, at least it's sort of that repurpose middle ground, and there's always recycling at the end of the day, and we have to kind of design things that can play across all those different spectrums because frankly people are busy, and you may not always want to spend that much time in making those decisions. So how do we just make it as easy as possible for them?
Sure. This is what I love, that so many companies are starting to take that partial responsibility to and just make it easier for the consumer. That's such a big part of it because, unfortunately, some people are lazy. I myself can be lazy at times as well.
I prefer busy.
Everyone's busy. Well, yeah. So lazy is not necessarily, I should give myself more credit, but yeah, when you're running around and the whole foundation of what Simply Good Jars was built on, you're running around like crazy. You're trying to make a good decision. You only have so many options to eat. So are you going to get something wrapped in waxed paper? Or are you going to get something that is a flimsy little Lunchable carton? Or are you going to get something that you could actually reuse and give back at the same time through Feeding America? It solves a problem on multiple levels. It's such a considerate thing. I love companies that do all of the things possible. It just makes my heart happy.
Me too.
Who knows? So back to the sustainability track with your MBA. This is something that we've not gotten to talk about yet on the podcast. I do have a sustainability researcher coming on in a couple weeks. Actually, with the alignment of our episodes, her episode might be right after yours. So we have a little sustainability focus going. So that will be exciting. But when did that come about? Is this a newer thing, do you think, in the business world? Or has this been kind of building for the past 10 to 15 years? Because I didn't realize that was a possibility to have a sustainability track for business.
Yeah, I think so. Because, if you asked me kind of where my origin point was, I think I took an elective course way back when in my undergrad where we touched on sustainable business, and, it just, for whatever reason, never popped, based on all these other different factors that you're doing. But at least I know in my master's program for sure, it wasn't well-defined track. So, there was some history there. But it still was, non-traditional. We actually took all the courses in the School of Engineering. So I'd be taking accounting and marketing, and then I'd go to a different school and be, learning about sustainable material science and things like that. So I think the experiences at TerraCycle, at Simply Good Jars, do a great job as serving as that connective tissue. But I still think maybe even a future development is how do we put those programs directly into the B school or directly into maybe the business classes in the sustainability engineering school. So I think there's a lot of ways to probably marry those two worlds because, I think they're ever more related now. Businesses that, crave purpose, businesses that, want to make some positive change in the world. It's usually going to end up being, something that has to do with sustainability.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that it started with the engineering side of things. When you said engineering, of course, I'm thinking like buildings and things like that. Though buildings can be built out of sustainable or more sustainable materials. Thinking of like the bridges in national parks that I've seen that are built out of like recycled milk jugs and things like that. But so it sounds like it's kind of started with the components of the project, not necessarily how to market the sustainability or how to build your business around having a sustainable model, but it sounds like it's turning into that. But it started in engineering. It started with the things that don't always have a place to go. That seems like it's the hardest part.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a natural life cycle that this is going to kind of go through, and as it gets more and more mainstream, they'll start finding new applications for it. But yeah, the roots of this, right, are in the world of the sciences, which is not a familiar place for the everyday consumer, perhaps.
Sure. Nor the businessmen, I would not assume. I mean, some tend to do a double major, but when you think of going into business, you might think of someone who's doing accounting or something very specific like that, or marketing, as I mentioned before. But who knows? Maybe there's that unicorn out there that wants to do both. They're doing, biochemistry or I had a friend that took at a liberal arts college, the composition of artist materials, something like that. But it was like the science behind paint and brushes and how they work together and stuff like that. Just, I don't know why that popped into my head, but maybe you have that unicorn that's going to want to do both. But I suppose that's why we all have to work together, to have one person come up with the components, one person come up with a business model that's going to use the components. If they're not applied, there's really no point in researching them. So it's a community effort, just like the partnership between the consumer and the business, the seller, the creator, the chef. And yeah, we all just do what we can and we keep doing better.
Absolutely.
It's a good thing. I love it. Cool. So with the B Corp certification, when was that achieved? You mentioned Simply Good Jars was founded in 2017. Was that a kind of a first thing on the docket sort of thing? Or did you just eventually say, hey, we're doing all of these things anyways?
I think it was, and I wasn't with the company at the time, but I think it
Sure.
was very early on. If anything, 2018 or 2019 is when we officially were certified. But to your point of cost, I don't even know so much that it was a financial cost, but certainly a time cost. Like many companies, humble beginnings, we had a few employees, and it just takes up a lot of time to do the work that's entailed with achieving that certification. And without the fact as well that we're being certified, I think next year and recertified. It's every few years that you have to go through that process all over again, or at least a version of it. So it was always the intention. I think Jared, our CEO, tells the story of working in a restaurant, going to his MBA program up at Temple, and just kind of going through the streets of North Philly, and having just thrown out all this excess food at the end of the night at a restaurant, and then trying to go through some of these areas that people are begging for food. It's just the whole system effect of food insecurity just became really real to him. So he kind of at that point told himself, if he's going to start a business, it's going to take into account it's going to take into account food waste. It's going to take into account packaging waste. It's really going to look at all these different, areas, while also just, building a business that, can reach and expand, in the more natural ways as well.
I would assume that having salads as your flagship product is a little easier than some to reduce food waste as far as manufacturing and creating the product goes, because salads, when you're done with, you have 5 tomatoes and then you have like half a tomato left over. Well, you're going to go get another tomato. It's not one of those things where I think about sometimes some of the meal boxes, but then I suppose maybe that, I don't know if that creates or alleviates food waste or not. The packaged food issue I find is if I buy something to use at my home, if I want to make a specific salad that I found in a cookbook or on a blog or something like that, I will buy the required greens, I will buy the required produce, but maybe it only takes like half of a bell pepper, or it takes a whole bell pepper, but I happened to go to Aldi that day. I love Aldi so much, but gosh darn it, I really hate that you have to buy 3 bell peppers at one time. And I tell myself, I'm going to use them. I will use the rest of the bell peppers. Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't do that good of a job, and that's on me. But when you're buying the packaged salad, the consumer then has no food waste because you didn't buy all of the extra ingredients and then end up not using 2.5 of your bell peppers. How does that look behind the scenes at Simply Good Jars? Is there a protocol in place for food waste to make sure that, you said you have 5 salads in rotation. Is there a plan to reuse the leftover from one salad type in the next salad type? Like, is there a production cycle that you go through? I'm just curious. Obviously, I'm thinking about this a little too hard, but maybe you have an answer. Maybe you don't.
No, it's the full life cycle, honestly.
Yeah.
Manufacturing facilities, up and down the East Coast at this point. So each facility, needs to pull in their own, unique ingredients. So what farms are we sourcing those vegetables from? How are they coming into that facility? How are they getting packed into that facility? And really the point of production to distribution becomes such a huge problem solve that we have to find. so many, food providers will, bring product to central warehouses where they sit for days or for weeks before they ever even get to the grocery store shelves. Our product, from the time it's made to the time it expires, is 10 days, which is usually a lot shorter than many of the other products that we have. So, to your point, we have, thought about the food waste and have, pre-portioned out these salads where, hopefully we're giving consumers the ability to eat this either in one meal or, the jar does reseal and you can have it over the course of a day or two. But, that just solving for the supply chain becomes such a big part of what we do, just to ensure that the product doesn't get wasted. And then, just within the food system, there's tremendous amounts of waste also just built into the way that things are marketed. So, if we go out to an event, we're bringing samples to those events. Many times, it's very hard to predict how many people will be there. So having those partners who are already donating to on the meal equivalent side, many times we're also, giving them, pallets of salads that are, getting close to their expiration date. Because, in our world, hopefully nothing goes to waste. So, when we can use the same sorts of ingredients from the same suppliers, when we can keep it as local as possible, we always, design our systems around that. But it's frankly, it's very challenging and we're always looking at how we can be a little bit better. But, for us, extending the shelf life of that product, giving it the best chance to end up in the store, end up in a consumer's hands, and hopefully end up in their bellies eventually. That's really where we spend the most of our time.
Sure. That's something that I did not consider previously. And also, I think you are the first guest whose company is, do you consider it a consumer packaged good still?
Yeah, absolutely.
It is, but it's also fresh produce, which I did not even think about how challenging that has to be, because it's not like it's a dried good, or it is a sealed jar, but it's not a sealed jar of like kombucha or something like that. Last week's episode, as we're recording this, was a kombucha maker in Brooklyn. That's just, man, Ben, that has to be hard. How do you find that you just keep finding new ways of doing things? Like, do you have to just, I suppose you just have to encounter the problem and then fix it when it arises? Or is there, at this point, perhaps maybe all of the problems have been solved? I don't know. Since it was founded in 2017, we're about 5 years in. We're getting there, but yeah. What are the problems that are still needing to be tackled? Do you feel like you've accomplished most of them, or the company's accomplished most, or still things on the list?
I would like to say we have, but no. It's constant iteration or iteration. I mean, we didn't really touch on this, but just to quickly take one step back. I mean, COVID, interrupted a lot of supply chains, but very, much so fresh food. So really took a, kind of a big, hit on our business, especially with the fact that most of our products were being distributed not at retail shelves, but through smart vending machines that were set up in offices and airports and train stations, a lot of places that kind of disappeared overnight back, a little earlier this time last year. So, for us, we've pivoted completely away from that vending machine model and have moved into a more of a wholesale distribution model. But that still even is a new business for us. So that was predicated. Before that was home delivery. We've tried a lot of different things, and each model, each turn or pivot poses new challenges. But at the end of the day, I think that's what keeps it really exciting. I think we're getting to probably the most scalable, the most thought out model, but it just hasn't happened overnight, and there's still plenty of challenges that we need to do. But thankfully, there are creative solutions. There are massive companies all over the world who have figured out ways to handle fresh food, and where we as a small little startup can take advantage of that, whether it's putting our salads on the back of a milk truck or a large produce truck, we'll do so. And we'll leverage that, from an efficiency standpoint to make sure that we're getting the product where it needs to get to. And that's unfortunately why we're not in Iowa yet. But the goal is national distribution as soon as possible.
Excellent. Do you have multiple packaging centers then, or is it the packaging center based in Philly and then puts it on the back of a produce truck or a milk truck, or like you said? Do you have multiple areas, or is the manufacturer solely in Philadelphia?
It's a hub and spoke model. So we have
Oh, okay.
a Philadelphia-based, actually in South Jersey, production facility, and then one up in New York, out on Long Island. So wherever we go in the country, you can create sort of little service areas from there, and probably would take 13, 14 different service centers to be able to hit the entire population.
Okay, got you. I love that you said that you initially started with home delivery because I was trying to rack my brain. When you first went on my radar, this was like last fall, and I checked out Simply Good Jars and I'm like, "Oh, that's so cool." It's like the oh, I can't think of any of their names. Like, is Sunbasket one, I think? The meal delivery subscriptions, things like that. You still have to make them, which can be challenging for some people with time and energy. I swore that you were a home delivery. And then I went to your website, I think when I contacted you back in January or February. I'm like, I didn't think that's what they did. But you did previously. You've just changed the model a couple times. I'm glad I wasn't crazy.
Oh no, I think people have been fans for a long time. Some of us know us from home delivery, some know us from the smart fridges, and then some people know us from us as the consumer product company. And
Sure.
it really just depends on how long you've been following us. A lot of people have just been introduced to the company. I'll throw in the plug that we were just featured on Shark Tank back in March. So if you haven't seen us yet, the show I think will be re-airing every few months or so. But that's how we, in many ways, kind of broke out in the last, for our last iteration of who we are. But the salad, the jar concept has been consistent all the way through, and I think that's what we've been really able to fine tune, and that's where I think that the most development is done now. Is we really have a good way to put all those different ingredients that you mentioned in a jar, keep it from spoiling. It's conveniently packed, so all you have to do is shake, open, and eat it. It has a second or third life sort of built in by design, and now we have the partnerships in place to get it to you, faster, bigger, quicker, etc.
Love it. Do you think you'll go back to the home delivery at all, or are you pretty content with the wholesale? I know that's not your job in the company, but
Yeah, I think one thing at a time. One thing at a time. You're trying to expand to your local grocery store, and if we can do that, I think that's step A in our what success looks like.
Sure. Excellent. So, with your experience with TerraCycle and with Simply Good Jars and just being a conscious consumer or ethical consumer, if you will, drop our name there, do you have any suggestions or recommendations to consumers who are looking to be more sustainable or considering which companies to support and buy from?
Yeah, I really like the name ethical, because I think that's such a great deviation from where many people associate sustainability with. It's usually about how do I do more of something or how do I do less of something. It's usually sacrifice based, and I don't think that's necessarily what it's all about. I think it's really just awareness, and once you kind of educate yourself and build that awareness, you just start realizing that maybe you're pulling from those inspirational examples from your grandparents, or maybe you're just listening to a podcast and you're hearing a brand that seems cool and wonder why other companies aren't doing that. And so I think as you just become aware, you start understanding that there are different ways to do things. And I think a lot of times in my career trajectory, that's what I became aware of. I knew that you could make food, and I knew how you could get food into thousands of millions of homes, but I wasn't sure exactly maybe how that would apply to something that's healthier, better for you, better for the planet. And then I've been able to see that journey in my own personal experience. So I think that's what I would tell anyone. Any impact is a big impact. It just takes that sort of initial leap, or that kind of curiosity that'll drive you forward.
Sure. I kind of like to use the comparison of essentialist versus minimalist, because I love the way you put that. It seems like it's a sacrifice to save the environment or support farmers or support people of color. Like, it doesn't have to be a sacrifice. It really, I don't like that we consider it to be either, but it's just the little things, the little steps, and doing it more frequently, doing it a little bit better every time really does start to add up. That's excellent. Do you have any recommendations for people in, a business major right now, or maybe they're working for a big food company and it's kind of starting to weigh on their conscience? Any books, or maybe their university doesn't have a sustainability program. I think more and more are starting to now, but if they don't have that access in a class or at their fingertips, what would you recommend?
Well, I mean, one of the real benefits of COVID, not to take away from any of the negative side, is just how small the world has become. So we have more access to information than we've ever had before, and in many cases, and take this from the startup that doesn't come with millions of dollars of funding, is a lot of this stuff is free now, which is great. So podcasts are free. Going to conferences, really large scale conferences in many cases have been made free this past year. Going on YouTube. I mean, there's just so many different ways to access really high quality information that you wouldn't get, maybe just kind of going through your news feed on social media. Albeit, there are good things there as well. So, I think it's really just more volume of information because, at the end of the day, sustainability, ethical consumption, all those things are really broad topics, and you may not be interested in all of those areas. But as long as you find sort of your niche, it could be waste, it could be hunger, it could be, some sort of rights-based area. I mean, they're all good. No, there's no, kind of competition internally in these kinds of spaces. It's just all about finding what really moves you and what's going to make you interested in educating yourself even further.
Excellent. That's beautifully put. Thank you so much. That was a really, really eloquent way of just describing, the past year, and everything's there. It really is. We do have a lot of things at our fingertips. So keep looking, keep going for it. Awesome. So we can find more information on Simply Good Jars and hopefully seeing them pop up in even more states. Maybe going back to the vending machine, maybe going back to the shelf model. We'll see what happens. Simplygoodjars.com is your website. And if store owners or campus commissary providers, if they're interested in getting them at their locations, can they find wholesale information on your regular website as well?
Yep. Yeah, they can sign up to be a partner. We're looking constantly for retailers, distributors, people to make the product. I mean, really any way that someone wants to engage with us, we're here to be of service. And I mean, ultimately, I think is my job. If I can get products in as many people's hands as possible, I'm doing a good job, because I think once you try the item, you'll be surprised on how good it really is. There's maybe a stipulation or an objection of people looking at packaged food sometimes, but give it a shot. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Higher quality packaged food. Not all packaged food is created equal.
Absolutely.
Nor is there end of life.
Chef approved on our side.
There we go. I love that he was the founder was originally the chef too, and he's still in it. He's still present. It wasn't a not to knock a business idea, but it wasn't a business idea that just found a chef. It was, he saw the need. He realized that restaurant industry was perhaps not the most sustainable in its food waste and packaging efforts, and he went and solved that problem. I love it.
Yeah, it's a great story. It got me interested, and I hope it gets a few more people interested as well.
Cool. Well, I hope this podcast episode will. I know I learned a lot. The wheels started turning in my head, obviously, as I get lost in my rambly thoughts but the food waste and the food baskets and what's going on. And it's a really interesting thing to try to wrap your head around. And that's what we're about, trying to demystify what goes on in the food and beverage industry. And once you start thinking about it, you kind of can't stop. It's
right.
Exciting.
Take anything away, you can do something. It doesn't have to be a Simply Good jar, but we hope so.
For sure. Most definitely. Well, I hope to see you in Iowa soon. And if not, I will definitely be looking for you in my hopefully upcoming travels. Eventually, maybe, and later this year, we'll get to do that again. So I'll be excited and keep an eye out for you for sure.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Julia.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. Again, this has been Ben Weir with Simply Good Jars. You can find them at simplygoodjars.com, also on Instagram and Facebook, of course, in several states and more to come. You can find us at the.ethicalconsumer on Instagram, on Facebook, iTunes, Spotify. If you're already listening to us, you knew where you found us. So there you are, friends. I'll see you next time.